meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is the Forgotten Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Forgotten Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Cabe, and I am so happy to be with you. If you are part of the foster care community, passionate about serving, or simply interested in learning more, we are here for you. In every episode of this podcast, you will hear stories from men and women who have experienced foster care to one degree or another. They may have grown up in the system, are caseworkers, foster parents, or others who are here to bring you hope or encouragement. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe and share it with a friend. And remember, you are not alone. I hope you enjoy the Forgotten Podcast. Today, I get to talk to Abby Callison about the advocate role, which is so fun. But I love talking to our advocates on the show. But I want to tell you a little bit about Abby before I begin. So Abby is married to Jared, and he is the discipleship and youth pastor at their church in Iowa. Yeah. They are parents to a sweet 8-year-old daughter and are currently foster parents with one additional little one in the home right now. Yeah. Did I get it right, Abby?
Yeah, you did.
Good. Well, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on.
I'm so excited to be here. That's awesome. Thanks for asking me.
Of course. Your journey to become an advocate with us at TFI started when you filled out an application. Yeah. It was about a year ago. Yeah. October 2022. Yeah. And that's really when we first started to get to know you. But it certainly wasn't really the beginning of your foster care journey. So that's where I'd love to start today. Take us back when you were first introduced to foster care, and really what made you step into becoming a foster parent.
Yeah. So, I don't know exactly like when I first was introduced to foster care as like this idea or this concept, because if I grew up in church, and there's any church I've been a part of, I think there's been foster families or things like that have been, part of our church family. But I went on a mission trip to Africa and just lived in an orphanage for a while. And so the idea of vulnerable children has been in my mind. But it wasn't until, I want to say 2018, 2019, my husband's sister-in-law and her sister, and husband started the process of foster care and getting training and everything like that. And she's like my best friend. So it was in the time where we didn't have kids, they just had a baby. So we were able to spend a lot of time with them, and, they would go to classes and we would just be able to like learn from them. And then they would, we discussed trauma and the trainings and the teachings and all that. And then they got their first call. And I remember she called me, and we live about 2 hours apart. So she called me. She's like, I'm going to pick up a little boy at a daycare today. And I'm like, okay, I'll be there, And so that just kind of started the like real life living and seeing foster care firsthand. And so that was a really cool thing. And they ended up adopting that boy. So it's just been an amazing experience, and hard for sure. But yeah, so that was my first real life experience of
exposure. And it really makes a huge difference, doesn't it, to see an actual child as opposed to just hear about a stat. Or there are many children, but to see a child, to meet a child. I mean, I remember that being an experience for me when my husband and I first started to become aware of adoption. Yeah. And we saw some kids come home from overseas, and it was like, whoa, like this is, it was just different. It really impacted me. So we share an interesting part of our story in that way.
Yeah. And just to see, I mean, like you just kind of said, we did have a family that did overseas adoption and things like that, which was so cool. But again, just kind of a different point of view when you're talking about foster care and things like that. So, yeah.
When did you, how far from when, your sister-in-law and her husband became foster parents, when did you guys become?
So the way we became foster parents was not your typical, because, my husband and I we were both working, both serving in the church, things like that. And it's, foster care was definitely something we wanted to do. But, maybe the typical, maybe it wasn't the right time or whatever type of response in our minds. But we got a call from a lady in our church that had heard about 3 kids from our church that had just gone into care because one of the kids had a life-threatening accident. We ended up taking in our daughter and then one of her brothers. And after a month, they needed to be separated. I wasn't able to handle some of the behaviors coming from that situation. And, luckily we were able to see him go to a different home that he was adopted in. And then we got to adopt Susie. And Susie and I talk a lot about, Susie, I held you when you were 2 days old. Like, I took care of you in the nursery and I was one of your VBS leaders and everything like that. And it's just like one of those amazing things that I am so grateful that I have with her, because you don't always get that in foster care.
Right.
And like, I knew your mom before you did. And you still go to, she still goes to church with her grandma and grandpa. And it's a really neat way. I love our story and how God just really used the church. I mean, because I always say I wouldn't have gotten into foster care when we did if it wasn't for the church, because we wouldn't have gotten called. And I definitely wouldn't have said yes if these weren't kids from our church. Even in her brother and hers case, like, they were able to have a triple adoption to keep that bond and everything together. So yeah, her story is pretty neat and it's pretty special to my heart. So yeah.
That is awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. I love that. So after becoming a foster parent, when did this kind of desire, or even when did you even learn about the advocate role? How did that come about?
Yeah. So again, my sister-in-law introduced me to TFI and she's like, you should listen to this podcast. Okay, great. And I have no idea what I'm doing. First, as a mom, it's one thing to like start being a mom, and then it's one thing to like start with a foster, in the middle of COVID when they're 5, and it was just kind of crazy, but
just kind of.
So I think at the time I was listening to Risen Motherhood and the Forgotten podcast at the same time, just kind of meshing the worlds together.
Love it.
And so just through that, just kind of reading on the webpage, following, hearing stories from the podcast, more about the advocate role and what they do. So, yeah.
Very cool.
I just did a deep dive into the website, I guess.
And what was it about the advocate role that prompted you to say, I want to pursue this?
The church and the foster care world being brought together. Because like I said, I literally we wouldn't have Susie if it wasn't for the church. And we wouldn't have maybe gone into foster care when we did if it wouldn't have been for the church. It's the church. It's the church and the foster care. Two of my favorite things, just put together. And that's what TFI is literally about. So
yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So when you first started filling out the application, what kind of things are you thinking?
I was thinking, this is very detailed. They're not going to give this to anybody. I don't know. I don't necessarily know exactly what I was thinking. Like, what do I expect from this? It's not like I've ever, applied to be an advocate before, but, you walk through what's your church history? What's your foster care history? All that kind of stuff. And I just remember thinking, they really want to know who they're putting on their team, and very selective in it, which says a lot about the organization. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So after you filled out, we're just going to kind of walk step by step through this, Abby.
Yeah.
After you filled out the application,
Yeah.
You were contacted for an interview from some of our team members.
Yeah.
This would have happened in about November.
Yeah.
And you heard you were accepted in late November, early December sometime. And then you jump into 3 months of training.
Yeah.
January through March.
Yeah.
I would love to hear your experience with training.
Yeah. So again, not really sure what I was looking. I didn't necessarily know what training would look like, I guess, especially because, we're all over the country.
Right.
And, we do what we can, but who would, I would much rather, go sit at a table and learn from you and Holly and Sarah and just all those things. But I had great coaches, and I think a total of 3, which I don't think is normal during the time of training, but just I loved getting into the roundtables with the other advocates. And also just my one-on-ones with coaches were super helpful because you could kind of dive more into your community, your ministry. But it was really helpful to hear what's going on in the other parts of the country. I live in North Iowa, so the resources for the foster community, especially social workers, is like, I can't think of one resource they have. And then, I had people in Texas or the South or stuff like that, they're experiencing such different things. And it was so cool to listen or maybe get ideas of things that we could try here. Would that work here? Would that translate into North Iowa and what our community could use? So, there was also, we would have tasks or goals that we needed to work towards throughout the month. And some were much easier than others. That initial contact with the church, I thought was a little bit easier because my husband's on staff at our church. And then when it comes to DHS, that's still proven to be tricky. So, there are just moments where you feel like maybe you're going along and then I feel like I've been here for a few months. So, but yeah. And I will say I was pretty excited when our coach wasn't available and we got to have you a couple times. That was so cool because not only, can you give light in the advocate role, but also just the organization. I remember you shared one thing about not being overcommitted. Don't overcommit. And I was like, oh my word, that's so profound. And yet it's not, but it is. It's like, because I want to do that. I want to go and I want to promise the world to these people.
Right.
But it's always good having a group of people that can kind of give you different input. So yeah, training
awesome.
was a really neat time. Yeah.
Most of what we've learned has come through areas that we have failed first.
Absolutely. And that's so great.
We get to fail first so we can help you learn. I think probably the saying you're thinking of is don't overpromise and underdeliver. That's what I meant.
Yes, that's it. Yes. It had to do with you promising a building or something.
Yes,
like that.
I was very excited. I felt like, of course we can offer you a building. Sure, the people will come in. Yes.
It's so like last night, so one of my friends is a DHS worker and she's been going through it, been going through it. And I'm texting her last night and she's, just kind of pouring out her heart. And I just wanted to promise her something. I wanted to give her hope. And she's like, but I just kind of kept my mouth shut because I don't even know what that would be. But you hear the stories from all 4 communities in the foster care world. And you do. I get it. You want to promise the world. And especially when you have a very supportive church behind you, you're like, we can figure it out. Right. We can do it.
Of course we can do this.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. So.
No,
that was a good lesson you taught.
Well, good. Well, it was a hard fought lesson to learn. Yeah, I'm still learning at times.
I'm sure.
Okay. Were you surprised that there were other advocates coming in at the same time as you, or is that something that you were expecting?
I think I expected that just because TFI is national. Mm-hmm. And, just looking at the map on the website of where advocates are and different things like that. Yeah. So I was not only expecting it, I was looking forward to it because again, just getting other people's insight is just so helpful. You did do the application, but you were contacted for an interview. What was that like? The first interview? I don't know. Maybe I should be more nervous about things like that than I am. But at the same time, when you're just so passionate about, I'm just so passionate about foster care and church. So essentially that's kind of what I had to sell, I guess, to Holly and Sarah. And it was just honestly just sharing my heart. And so it wasn't stressful for me, I don't think. Good. Just put a plug here for TFI National. I have not interacted negatively with any of you. And there is such a just kindness and understanding that comes from your team. And really anyone I've dealt with at TFI. But so there was no reason to be nervous or anything. And I just felt like I was given a space to share my heart, but also ask questions and maybe get a better understanding. And the one thing, when you're going into an interview and they ask you like, well, maybe what are the areas you struggle, or maybe, and I'm just like, I feel like there, if I think about it long enough, there could be areas where maybe I'm really not cut out for this. And yet there was just a reassurance that you don't have to be perfect to be a TFI advocate. You don't have to do foster care perfectly. You don't have to be a church member perfectly, because that's not the goal. So that was good. Well, none of us would be here. Exactly. If that was the case. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. No, that's awesome. So in April, Abby, you finally got to launch your ministry. You made it through the training and all of the things, and you got to launch your ministry. Tell us about the first event in raising awareness about foster care in your church. So I did take notes on this because I just felt like there were so many fun things about that day. Because one day is kind of explain to you can make this as big as you want. You can make it as small as you want. And I wanted to make it big. So, let's have fun with it and let's get excited, because people feed off of others' excitement. So our attendees, I did announcements. I had my sign, my big old poster up, and people could come up to my table and get information on it and sign up for one day. And there were so many people that were excited about it, which was so encouraging to me. The attendees, they ran the gamut of foster parents, pastors, deacons, Sunday school teachers of foster parents. There was some adoptive, there was some old foster youth. There was a bio mom that was there. That was really cool to have her there and share her part, her experience. So I think our turnout was about 45, which is really cool because, we got to add more chairs. That's always kind of a fun thing to do. That's fun. So, I kind of try to make it my own, which is typically a little extra. So I went to Costco and I got, we did drinks and we did brunch and we did coffee. I just wanted it to be a good time. And I even did, I don't know, I kind of wanted to do my own giveaways. And so I just went around the community and I got stuff from either things from local stores or that supported foster youth. I reached out to Goods and Better. I don't know if you know that company.
Yes.
And they sent,
yes.
They sent me some promotional material and some items to give away and then a gift card. It was just so fun to make that a little extra. We did kind of a table of recommended resources. Had the We Love series there. So that was really neat to just show people who, it didn't matter what they came to with the knowledge of foster care when they came to this event. Because some people are just like, I just know that we have foster kids in the church. And some are like, I was a foster kid, so it was just educational is the word I would describe one day. And at the end, we, after, we go through all 4 of the community members of the foster community, we really tried to highlight on our DHS workers, our social workers, and we wrote thank you notes to them. And we're able to give those out to them. I waited a little bit after just to kind of establish more of a long game with them, but it was really neat. There was a lot of interest. I've had a few people reach out afterwards and be like, how is it going with this? Or how is it with this? And so that's really neat. We do have such a supportive church, which I'm very blessed to have that, because maybe not all advocates get to work with such a supportive church. But that is wonderful. I love that. So one thing that we noted was back in your application, I don't know if you'll remember the answer you put here, but one of the things we ask potential advocates is about any hesitations they are feeling about stepping into the advocate role. And you shared one, and it is actually one that we do hear quite often. And your hesitation was this: the idea of being overwhelmed. Foster care can be overwhelming itself, and sometimes it feels like I can't add any more. I want to do this well because I believe it is so important, but when I feel inadequate, the feeling of being overwhelmed quickly follows. So as you think about that now, is that still a hesitation, or what has it looked like to navigate those feelings of overwhelm as an advocate? It's definitely a hesitation, but that's only because I put it upon myself. It's not because anyone else puts that on me, but me. And in fact, another little plug here at TFI, we're doing a advocate book club right now. And our coach picked a book that, oh my word, just wrecks me every week. But it's essentially about this topic of being overwhelmed and overdoing it and thinking you have something to prove. It's called Nothing to Prove by Jenny Allen, and it is amazing. I remember one of our last meetings, it's one of the other advocates like, I feel like I've been to church. This is just so good. And it's true. I have poured out my heart a decent amount on this topic in our book clubs. So it's not just like when you're an advocate, you're just an advocate alone in your own state, in your own town. But there is a team of people that are cheering for you and probably going through a lot of what you're going through.
For sure.
But anyway, so yes, the feeling of being overwhelmed is definitely something that I still struggle with because I put it on myself. But like I said, not once have I felt like a TFI staff member has ever put that on me. And in fact, I feel like they do a really good job of taking that burden off. And I remember one time, this is still in training, so I had my my tasks to do and things like that, and I wanted to prove myself. Like, I was given this role, and I want to do it well, and I don't want these people to think that they chose wrong. But I was in a really hard foster care moment, and I just couldn't get my stuff done. And I just remember my husband being like, Abby, it's a foster care ministry. Anyone in this world understands it's these people. And that was true. And a few weeks later, I got a card from the entire national staff just telling me that they're praying for me. So it is. I have no reason to be overwhelmed. It's just lies that I tell myself that this is riding on me. But the staff does such a good job of taking that load off. And also just this reminder that I need to remind myself of, this is not to make me look good. This is not to make my name great. This isn't even to make TFI's name great. It's to make Jesus's name great.
Amen.
And he can do that by himself. He doesn't need me. He chooses to use me. And I think that's so cool. But yeah, so
I love that.
Yeah.
When I think we highlight that also, I wanted our listeners to hear that, because as we enter new seasons of bringing on new advocates and opening up those applications again, that is just so common. And we just want to help dispel that. That you don't even have to be a foster parent to become a TFI advocate. You just have to, you have a humble spirit. You want to learn, you want to connect the church with the agency, right? You want to be a part of God's work in this. And that is, I mean, I love that.
Well, and it was funny when Jody, our coach, was talking about why she chose the book she did. She's like, there's this typical theme in talking to advocates. And it is that, I got to prove myself. I got to do this. I got to do that. And she didn't tell us that until after we read the first 2 chapters. And I'm just like, you could warn a girl, like, oh my goodness. Like, Jenny Ellen I've never spoken to her, but you wouldn't believe it. Like, just based on the ways that she says stuff. And I even gave the book to my husband, and I was like, if you want to read a book about your wife, he's like, no, I read the back page. And I'm like, wow, and then you get into this group of ladies and like, yes, we've all felt this way. And so, and I don't think that's just with advocates. I think it's with a lot of us, So,
absolutely. Yeah, for sure. What motivates you to keep going?
Yeah, I think that changes from time to time. I think sometimes I just, I'll interact with a foster kid or a foster family and just like that. Yeah, this is why we do what we do. Or I've had some really cool experiences with a previous placement's bio mom. And I'm just like, yeah, that's why we do what we do. Or a coaching session, just like kind of ramp me up. And I'm like, all right, but at the end of the day, it has to be the gospel. Because if that is not what is keeping me going, then it's all going to fall flat. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
And there are moments where I am not motivated by that. And not a lot gets done because my love for the community is based on me instead of Christ. And so, foster care and the church, even just those 2 things together. I mean, if our love is not directly from the gospel of Christ to give that hope to others, I think the motivation falls flat.
Right.
After our energy runs out. And it does. Our energy runs out pretty dang quick.
Pretty quick, yes.
So yeah, I think the short answer is just the gospel. The gospel is what keeps us going at times. All the time. But yeah. So
yeah, I love that so much. I was just thinking about that today, actually. I am just so, the more I just ponder and think on the gospel, what Jesus did for me and for you, right? For people, sinners, and rebelling against him. Yeah. And yet he not only loves us, but he died for us, right? And then he poured back into us through his Holy Spirit. And, for those who, and all he says is just acknowledge that, right, that you are a sinner and recognize your need for me, and I'm here. Yeah. It's mind blowing to me still. And I was thinking about how, as an advocate, as a human, as a Christian, we can only give what we have. Yeah. what we've been given from him. And so I say this often, but like, I really believe we have to receive deeply from him so we can give generously to others. Just like you were saying, we run out. If we just give generously, even out of like a desire to help, a good desire, it's going to run out. Yeah. But if we're receiving from him, getting our strength from him, recognizing our need from him, then it flows out. Yeah.
Yeah. I tell a lot of people, I would never do foster care if I didn't know the Lord, because I don't have that kind of love within me on my own merit. And also there is no hope without the gospel. So I look at the situations that my daughter and other kids have come into my home, and I'm broken by them. I don't get them. And if I didn't have the love and the truth of the gospel and the hope of the gospel, what would I give them? And what would their pain mean? What would it matter? But I mean, these kids have walked through things in their small amount of years than I ever have. And I cannot imagine living, doing life with these kids without showing them the love and purpose of Christ, because that's one of my favorite things about the Lord, is just like, he gives me purpose.
Yeah, he does.
And, people think foster parents are crazy enough that it's just like, but there's a purpose behind what I do. And it's not for me. It's for him. And I don't always feel that way. Sometimes I'm very selfish in why I do foster care, because I want to look good. But what keeps me going is just, I have purpose, and I can love. Yeah. I can love through that. And so,
yeah. And he's the one who can create beauty from the ashes, that there's going to be a hope at the end. Yeah. Sometimes we see it in the middle of this, in the messy middle between what was and what is to come. But sometimes we don't. But we can know that he will make all things right in the end.
And that is hard. I think walking, with just things that people have done, or how they have hurt children that I love when I wasn't able to be there to protect. And I do have that question of like, God, why did you allow this? But, it is to make his name great. And I know that sometimes people struggle with that idea. I do too. But at the same time, I know, and I can trust that he is so good. He's been so good. And, and I look back on our story of just my husband and I's life. And then through foster care, I'm just like, wow, you're an amazing God. You're an amazing God. So yeah.
And I think, don't you think we struggle with that idea of that it is for his glory? Because as humans, if we're doing anything for our glory, there's so many mixed, wrong wrong motivations. We don't understand. We don't have the mind of Christ. And so we can't understand that him wanting his glory is actually for our good too.
Right. Exactly.
And it is good. It is a good motive, right? There is no evil motive in him.
Right.
It is like the way we were designed to live. Like he created us so that we'll bring glory to him. And that's what's going to actually bring us the most joy.
And you can see that if you step back enough and look at your life when you've let God use you.
Yes.
I mean, there is joy from it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Even in the midst of the struggle.
Absolutely. For sure. Yeah. And there's lots. So there's
lots of struggle.
There's lots of opportunities to see God at work.
That is right.
Yeah.
Abby, I love talking with you. And as we start to wrap up here, I'm thinking of the person listening who's going, this is resonating with me. I also love the church and I love foster care. Yeah. And I want to see these communities connected.
Yeah.
What do you want to say to them? Like, how do they, just encourage them, just as if you would hope someone would encourage you listening.
Sure. As far as being an advocate, it can look different. It can, for some people, it's maybe more of it's not as time consuming as it maybe would be for another. It can look different. And that's the one awesome thing about TFI is no advocate looks the same, because every advocate is dealing with different, stages of life. We were in the cohort this year. I want to say there was another advocate who had like 7 kids. Probably going to look different. And that's great.
Right.
That's great because ultimately she's loving those kids. She's loving her community. So yeah, just kind of evaluate where you're at. And again, we can't do it all on our own. And that's really important to remember as well.
I want to share a vision that you have shared for your community that I think is really beautiful. You said having churches being thought of as places of refuge and love in times of need and hurt for vulnerable children would be transformative in our community. And Abby, just as we close, I would love for you to speak directly to your church. I know that you have already shared some thankfulness for them, but would you just speak, just share your heart for them and for the ways they've already stepped in, and even maybe the ways you'd love to see them step in and continue walking.
Yeah, I love my church family, and it's like talking about my family. It's just a really neat group of people that God's allowed us to do life together. But there are a lot in the church that see such a need and burden for vulnerable children or different people within the foster community. We, as foster parents, have been blessed 10 times over by this church and how they have loved and supported us. But I do think, because our community has a real issue with substances, drugs, lots of violence, crime, things like that. So foster care is pretty prevalent, and our social worker turnover is crazy. We don't have foster parents. There is a need for encouragement, love, and a place of refuge in our community. And I would love to see that become more and more, not just our church, but the body of Christ. That it's again, it's biblical that we are there for those that cannot fend for themselves, and so that we do that sacrificially. My husband just preached on the Good Samaritan, and it's a hard-hitting but very applicable to this situation. To love is to be vulnerable and sacrificial, and that is something that I think a lot of our church does well. Not perfectly, but I think we do that well, and I hope we are able to continue to do so.
Wow. Yeah. Abby, thank you so much for being a TFI advocate. Thank you for being on the show today and just for sharing your experience. Well, I hope that today's episode encouraged you wherever you are on your foster care journey. We want you to stay connected, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you will never miss an episode. Also, we have great content at theforgotteninitiative.org. Thank you for watching. I cannot wait to be with you next time.